Brandon, what is up?
Not much. How are you?
Doing awesome. Super excited about our topic today, episode 8,
Yep.
the owner's job description.
Yeah, I could see this one being a little touchy. We'll see.
Okay, all right. Well, let's introduce the podcast. This is Talk Ops, the video podcast for business owners ready to organize. Growing, selling, or handing off your business takes order. Brandon and Chris to discuss everything related to organization, accountability, and all things that help you grow, sell, or even take a vacation from your business. We're your hosts.
I'm Brandon.
He's Brandon. I'm Chris. And today we're going to talk about we're going to do episode 8, which is the owner's job description. Last time we talked about how to think in general about your role at your company. And then today we're talking about how to define your job description. So growth starts, the intro of this episode. The topic is growth starts with the owner, with you, the owner. Maybe the first day of your business, you're doing most of the things, but you should have a plan to not be needed so much in the everyday. That means you have to think about how to not be involved in the everyday.
Yep.
Eventually, let's talk about how to think about your long-term role as a business owner so that you're creating a company that can grow and sell and where you're not constantly putting out fires. What do you think, Brennan?
Yep. I definitely agree. And it is a tricky topic. Let me tell you.
All right. Well, let me ask you then, have you ever worked at a place with pointless meetings?
Oh, I misread that.
Icebreaker question.
I read that as pointless meaning. Like there's no meaning to working there. And I actually had an answer to that. But pointless meetings. Yeah, I've had those too. And so everywhere I've worked where there ended up being pointless meetings was it generally came from a place of the owner not knowing, or just the leader, because sometimes it wasn't an owner, the leader not having a direction, so nothing ever changed in the business. And personally, for me, a meeting is a place to talk about change, things that are happening in the organization, keeping people up to date, moving things forward. Well, they weren't moving anything forward. They didn't have any general direction, but they felt like there still needed to be meetings because they viewed meetings as a place to, I guess, just be together, team building, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we just have these meetings that gave no direction, gave no update on the organization. It was a pseudo team building activity, which wasn't really done properly either. So they just ended up being
not
pointless.
stated as such.
Yes. Yeah. They weren't even stated as, hey, these are going to be team building. Let's do some activities to team build. It was just show up, and it was just a waste of time.
So yeah, and I've had times like that where I didn't know what my job was at the meeting. In fact, we had a recent meeting with a client where they wanted to get to know us, and at my main job, and it was the CEO of the company, our company, just really knowledgeable, knows what they want, knows what they need. So he was doing most of the talking. And I'm like, I better say something, or I'm gonna be useless at this meeting. Like they're gonna think we're not involved in things. And so I looked for a way, and it's kind of awkward sometimes to try to do that, to try to get into a meeting, to try to get saying something. When yeah. And so I ended up doing it, and it was fine. And then the other guy on the call from our company did as well. But afterward, they said the client gave us feedback. We didn't win. We didn't win it. We weren't a front runner. We were was a dark horse. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we didn't end up winning it, but we overperformed what they thought we would. And but the feedback was that they thought that the owner was the only one who really understood what they needed, and he wasn't going to be involved in the project, our CEO. And so that was very interesting. So there are a lot of things about meetings we don't think about when when you first start having meetings. There's a ton of things we don't think about. What's the goal of the meeting? It makes sometimes though, meetings in the day to day at work can sometimes feel, if they don't have a goal, people start getting this bad attitude about meetings at work. And are meetings always useless? Well, if they are, then we shouldn't ever be having them. But if they're sometimes useful, we need to understand how they're useful. And this isn't really our main topic, but it does come up.
Yep.
So anyway, fun stuff. All right, Brandon. Let's take it from the top. What's the difference between owning a business that's a job and owning a business that's an investment?
One word, involvement. How involved does the owner have to be?
That's really good. Yeah.
If they have to be highly involved, it's a job. If you're not, if you can step away and basically be hands off, it's an investment. Look at the stock market. I can go out and buy 100 shares of Microsoft. I'm now an owner of the business. It's an investment. I never have to do one bit of work in Microsoft, but yet I get to reap the benefits of however the stock performs and the company performs.
Yeah.
That's an investment. A job, you get up at probably 6 in the morning and you work till 10 at night and you're still working on it. You might still get to reap the rewards because you are the owner of it, but you just put in a 14-hour day trying to fix all the fires, and it's a job, not a investment.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what you see a lot. We have this book, Work the System, that I love. And man, this guy was like Bend, Oregon. He was I think they had a call center that's outsourced customer service. And he was just running himself ragged, health-wise, just disorganized. He had personal problems. I think there was a divorce, maybe. Before I slander him, I better you guys can fact check me. This is Sam Carpenter. It's called Work the System. Great book. And just a great example of realizing he can't be there all the time, or it's not scalable. If he's needed 14 hours a day, if you're needed 14 hours a day in your business, you're not building an investment. As soon as you're gone, the business is gone, and you have nothing to show for it except for some assets. And we all know, well, I don't know if we all know, but when you go to buy a stock in the stock market, you're not buying a piece of the assets. You're not just buying a piece of the assets. You're buying present value of future dividends. That's correct. Technically the stock price. And so that means you're buying the earning power of the business. You're not buying the assets of the business. You're not buying a dump truck. You're buying all the money a dump truck can bring in, and the ability to manage that dump truck and make sure it lasts a long time. And then the ability to save up money to buy the next dump truck when that one, and the ability to buy a bigger fleet. That's what you're buying when you buy an investment. You're not buying the assets. So if you're the one who's required to run the business and nobody else really knows how to do things, man, you just have some assets in the end. You just have, maybe you have a vehicle that you bought on the company and paid off. All right. Well, when something happens to you, that's what your wife gets. If you die, she gets the car, and that's all.
Yep, pretty much.
But an investment. So all right. So we've talked a lot about let's tie that in, because we've talked a lot about how do you get to where you're building an investment rather than just a business? How do you get out of it? How do you get out of it and still own it? How do you manage it? And we talked about last time a lot of the cognitive styles, like you're a technician, you're you shouldn't be owning a business, maybe not, maybe you need partners, maybe there are some other ways to do it. And I think you and I would love to talk to somebody who feels like they're stuck in that position. And so please comment on YouTube, and we'll figure out how to get in touch,
Yep.
let's say you're in your 60s and you're wondering, hey, is it too late for me? I've been running ragged and I work too much. And if I wasn't here, the business wouldn't know how to run. Um, you're in your 60s. First of all, is it too late, Brandon? Is it too late for me to make a plan, make a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, or whatever, to get myself in a better position to sell, to hand off to my kids, and then to for it to be less of a stress on me?
Nope. And I know it's kind of the, if you study business at all, it's kind of the poster child example, but look at Colonel Sanders. He didn't even start a business till he was in his 70s and eventually sold it off and all the good things that KFC did. So being in your 60s, no, it's not too late. Being in your 60s might direct how you need to solve that problem,
Yep.
but it won't necessarily, it's not too late. Because one thing as you were talking about all that, one caveat I do want to put in is sometimes working that 14 hours a day running ragged, that is part of the price of being an entrepreneur, particularly in startup mode. Like I've studied Elon Musk and things like that, where he talks about the first 5 years of starting Tesla. He basically slept in the factory and slept underneath his desk. He was working 120-hour weeks to get that thing started. But it's because it takes so much effort to build all those systems, because you have to do the building of the systems, working in the business to get those started, because you're the only person there, or potentially the only person who knows how to do it. But you also need to do the working on your business and look at the strategic side of things. And you need to do both sides of it. And oftentimes there's no shortcut other than just get it done.
Mhm.
So you will have periods as an entrepreneur. I think we get this false sense of what an entrepreneur is, that it's just all this rosy job and hey, I'll never work more than 40 hours in a week and it's going to be all great and all this kind of stuff. And no, it's actually brutally difficult to be an entrepreneur, and you will have to put in a lot of hours and there is pain, but there should be an end in sight, which goes back to your point of making a plan of, I'll do this for a year, 2 years, whatever that is, but I have a plan that if I do it, I will be out of it and not have to be continuing in that lifestyle
Yeah.
forever. Which goes back to my point of, if you're in your 60s, is it too late? No, it's not too late. But if you're in your 60s, can you run 100-hour weeks anymore? I don't know. That might be tougher because you're getting up there. Your energy levels might be getting lower or something compared to a 20-year-old who's just starting up. So the way you go about that might be different than someone who's in their 20s, because you just have the factor of age at that point.
Right. But let me clarify though, because we're not talking about someone, we're not saying like get into business in your 60s. Like Colonel Sanders,
Correct.
that example is, cool, but Colonel Sanders might have been already an entrepreneur in his heart. And so he was kind of a natural to step in, and all
Yep.
that. We're also not talking about people who are in their 60s starting a business. We're talking about people who've been running a business for a while, right? Like,
Correct.
so they're already, so we're not worried so
That's
much about
true.
that, like, running yourself ragged. We're a little more like, you know, you've been doing this for, I don't know, maybe 20 years, maybe just
True.
5 years, maybe whatever. um you want to stop doing that crazy stuff.
Mhm.
You want to organize something that'll be worthwhile at the end. You don't want to have worked 14-hour days for 20 years because you, like you said, you didn't have that end in sight, right?
Yep.
And then you don't have anything to show for it at the end. You don't have anything of value that you can get, like sell for a couple million, or for like,
Mhm.
finance it out to where you're getting payments every month, for um, you know, for however long, and then it's going to go to your kids when, if anything happens to you or when you die, or your wife, and
Yeah.
as income every month so she can pay her bills and she doesn't have to depend on anybody else or depend on the government or whatever.
Hmm.
um so yeah, so I think that um if you're in the 60s, I agree with you, it's not too late. And I love the nuance that you add to it. It does determine a little bit how you approach it, like the kinds of plans you make. You and I have talked about when you're younger, you might have like a 10-year plan for getting completely out of your business, and you can kind of slow roll it. You don't have to rush. You might need to do it in 2 years,
Yeah.
you might need a 5-year plan. And I think we should totally do an episode on that, just kind of like what kinds of things to look at, at some point. But let's narrow down and let's just talk about like what are so last time we talked about how to think about your role, how to think about how you are in your business, so you can start to
Mhm.
think about like, how do I think in my business? And then the next step, once you've done that, once you talk to your wife, talk to other people, right? Talk to us maybe. Looked at how you act in your business, looked at like, okay, what do I tend to do? How do I tend to respond to things? How do I tend to handle things? And then the results of those things. Once you kind of gotten real a little bit about yourself, what's the way to what's the next step, right? And
Yeah.
what do we say that is in here? Or at least you mentioned this might be controversial. So maybe how would you characterize the next step?
Yeah.
Actions.
Yeah. Part of it is there's no one size fits all. I wish there was, and you could just say, here, this is how you fix all those problems. But there's so many variables that can go into it. I mean, age can be an issue. I mean, we were talking about 60-year-olds. I mean, if you're 65, you've been doing this for 20 years, there's a chance you have heart problems because you've been so stressed out for so long.
Mhm.
Again, you can't have a 10-year plan that a 20-year-old has. It's like, I might have a heart attack if this doesn't stop in the next 6 months or something like that. So, I mean, you got your age, your health, but on the flip side, as a 6-year-old, you could very well be in a better financial position than a 20-year-old when they're just starting, or
Mhm.
they've been in it for 5 years. So you have some capital resources that someone who's younger might not have. So you can say go out and hire someone.
Mhm.
But I would say, based on partly what you've got here, is you do need to pick a timeline, and that timeline will be different depending on how old you are, how many resources you have, how big's your organization. I mean, if you've been doing this for 20 years and you do have, say, 20 staff, you've got more human resources in your organization than someone who maybe's been doing this for 5 years. They've been grinding it out and they only got 1 or 2 employees. So
Right.
you might be able to delegate some stuff off, but you got to start with a timeline and a plan.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I think a lot of people they're overwhelmed by all the possibilities, and kind of like, well, it's different for everybody. That may not be as helpful, but if we're like, hey, you need a timeline and a plan, I think people are like, okay, that's something I can do. Like if you give me a step that like like the plan is going to be different for everybody, but the
Correct.
process for coming about that plan can be very similar. And I think that's kind of what
True.
we like to present today, which is, hey, there's a process, and you can nuance this process if you want, but here's a process.
Yeah.
And I would call it like writing your job description. And
Yep.
this really came about because I had a friend who is running a business, and he's like, hey, yeah, I need help organizing. And I'm like, okay, what can I do to help? He's like, well, I need a new software for this. I'm like, no, I don't understand that. Like, I don't know your business well enough to know what software you need off the top of my head.
Yeah.
And if you want me to research it, I'm still going to have to know the why of your business. I'm still going to have to know like, what should you spend on software like that? What does it make sense to spend? Like I need to know stuff from top down. And
Hmm.
so my first thing was like, hey, first thing we need to do before we do anything is we need to write down your job description. And so that's the and so that's really, I created a workshop which you and I could, like you and I could easily run, but basically it's just like, how do you write your job description? The first question is like, you need a timeline, um you need to, and I'll do, maybe I'll do the maybe we'll flip and we'll take turns.
Sure.
I think pick a timeline is probably one of the first things. Do you want to retire in 5 years and get the most out of your business? And how would you do that? Um, if you don't have a, like, the timeline sometimes brings things into reality. I was planning something at work, and it's like we're creating a plan, and I'm like, I don't know how urgent any of this stuff is. If we have 10 years to do it, the scope's way different, you know? So I'm like, all right, what's the soonest we can do it? Like
Yes.
we do it in the fall, the quickest we can do it. If we need to plan this tomorrow, how do we plan this by tomorrow? And then I'm going to throw them a timeline, and then they'll respond to that and say, oh, that's too quick, or that's whatever. I'm like, cool. Then what is the right timeline, right? And so we'll get there. But the first thing we have to do is say, if in doubt, I would just say pick 5 years. 5 years is enough time to get your business ready to sell get it organized, clean, understandable by someone else, by a buyer, by maybe many buyers, and then sell at full price, sell at full retail price. So,
Yep.
what's the next step? Or if we can get onto that, please do your thing.
Yeah. I think that is a good step. Now sometimes I say that comes with the caveat of you understand your business pretty well to begin with. Because some people might not even be able to pick out a realistic timeline. I think yours is a pretty good rule of thumb that 5 years is, when in doubt, pick 5 years. Because I've also seen.
I'm not saying you stay with it. I'm saying
Yeah.
5 years and you plan for 5 years, and then if you need a reason to make it quicker or farther out, do it.
Yeah. I've just seen some people, in my experience of helping other businesses and organizations, some people, they don't have a good sense of urgency. So, I've got 5 years, but it really should be done in one, just because this is really, really important. So they don't have a proper sense of urgency.
Or I've got 5 years and I don't start planning until 5 years.
Yes, that, or they're unrealistic in how fast things can get done in reality, where it's, oh yeah, I can knock this out in a year, but really that was like a 4-year project and they didn't even realize it. So I do think, I think 5 is a safe number. It allows you to get a lot of things done if you're planning properly and stuff like that. But I'd say don't be afraid to ask people. Again, feel free to leave us a comment below, and we can try to give you a little bit of feedback of, hey, is this realistic? I'm an organization of this size with this many resources or whatever. Can this be done in 3 years? You might want some feedback from someone, or you can hire a consultant or someone who's got some experience in that planning. But because I don't want to just assume everyone are good planners and can just say, yep, 5 years, I know I can stick to that and stuff like that. Because I've seen way too many people who can't plan and project projects accurately.
Yeah, and yes, for sure. And I think with any of these things you hear from this podcast, it's going to be case by case. There's going to be different
100%.
different skills. And it also depends on the experience of your consultant. If you bring in someone to consult with you, even if they're just showing up to give you advice once a week, planning timelines and stuff like that. But yeah, there's always going to be those things that are different. But I think that if you had someone who knew what they were doing, I think that your business you could agree on some achievable goals in 5 years. And let's say your business is never going to be perfect, but it'll be organized for sale if you have someone who basically is working from the end with the end in mind and is saying like, hey, 5 years, here's what this company looks like, and can paint that picture. If someone can paint that picture, you now have goals. If you have goals, you can now look at where we are today versus where we need to be. If you can see that, you can see all the things that need to change and when, and then you can start lining those things up in a way that makes sense, so that you're still making money the whole way through. In fact, maybe you're even gaining momentum. So for sure. But picking a timeline is just, you need to pick a timeline because it gives you something to model off of, not because you're going to stick to it, but because you need to pick a timeline so you have a structure for your plan. If you don't have that,
exactly.
you don't know how to do any of this stuff. So pick a timeline. That's all I'm saying.
Yep. I
What's
agree.
the next one, Brandon?
Once you have that timeline, then you need to fill roles and figure out where everybody fits in that. Because it's great to have a target, but if no one knows what that target is and no one knows what their job is in terms of getting to that target, you'll never hit it. And like I said, you'll end up pushing it out years because you're not organized with it. And with if you see a common thread through our podcast, it always starts from the top down.
Yep.
What is the owners and leaders' roles and responsibilities first? You got to be clear on that, which tying in our last podcast, you need to know as the leader of your organization, you need to know your tendencies first so that you can pick the right job descriptions for yourself that complement your personality type, and then everything else that doesn't go as what or you're not as fluent in, start hiring correctly, or hopefully you have someone in your organization already you can kind of delegate it down and that's their roles and responsibilities, but then get everyone in place pushing towards that goal, that timeline.
Yeah, your job as the owner is to push work down primarily. It's not to
Yep.
hold them to work. And so by thoughtfully writing your job description and then writing all those things that you're currently doing that are either frustrating for you, things that could be done by someone who's cheaper. Like if you're doing project management, it's easy to hire a project manager, a lot harder to hire a creative director, right?
Mhm.
Or something specialized. But it's easy to hire a project manager because they're a dime a dozen, and it's a job role that has a definition to it. So project manager is probably one of the easier things to hire. You can get someone to watch over your things and then report the important things to you. Uh, how do you push work down? So like, and then also those things that are specialized, and there are, yeah, ooh, yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. But yes, so write down your job description and then write down all those things you hate that are hard or that are too commonplace that you can just outsource. And then write those things down. And then that's where you have yeah, okay, I might get ahead of myself if I say then we prioritize those things and say, okay, here's the first thing you need to get rid of, second thing you need to get rid of, and then you have a little timeline saying like, here's how we're going to do that. And that's where a consultant comes in to be able to help you see those things. And then sometimes even give you permission if you're like one of those workaholics who thinks that, oh, in order to do this, you just have to be stressed all the time. And I've known people like that. I'm like, no, that's not
Yes.
entrepreneurship.
No,
That's
not at all.
that's guilt or something. I don't know what it is, but it's not entrepreneurship. And so get out of that mindset. But if you have a consultant, a lot of times they see a lot of those things and they can say from experience, oh, you have this idea in your head. You don't need to have that idea in your head. Let's talk about that. And so you can get rid of that in good conscience or something like that. But yeah, organize tasks, get rid of a whole bunch of them, and then isolate those things that you should be doing for a while. And even then, you're trying to get out of your business. So even then, you're trying to get rid of all of them. So yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing I'd add, and again, this could be a little controversial, but honestly, what I've found the root cause to a lot of those problems is just pride on the owner side.
Mm.
It's either, and it can be all sorts of different pride of either I'm the best at this task, so I'm going to just do it. So they think it can't be done better by someone else, which there's 8 billion people in this world. My guess is there's someone who can do it better than you, just statistically speaking.
Yeah.
Or you have this false sense of pride because America was built on the bootstrap philosophy of, hey, we came to this country and we just built it ourselves and we did all this, we did the hard work, and we need to continue in that way, and just we got to make things overly hard on ourselves, kind of like you're just talking about these people who are, they just feel like it's always got to be stressed out because that's the American way. That in my opinion, again, that's a false sense of pride built by the American culture. And there's a couple others here and there that you just, I want to do it because I can get fame for saying I did this job or something. And you're prideful about the glory you might get, which, oh, by the way, as a leader, you're not going to see much glory anyway. So trying to find it is kind of a false path in and of itself.
Well,
You
you
get your
don't get
glory,
paid.
you
You
sell
don't
it.
get paid for that when you sell. Is that what you're just gonna say? Yeah.
Yeah, I was
You
gonna
don't
say,
get paid for that on sale. Like when you sell your business, they're
correct.
not buying like, oh, you worked really hard. So like that's worth another 50% on top of that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, no, there's just buy, nobody's gonna do that. So
Yep. So yeah, it's just like my point being is most of those problems are all rooted in pride. So that you're prideful about something. And that is one of the hardest things to, I think, as humans, we are just a prideful species.
yeah,
And we just gotta being able to be brutally honest, recognize when we're being prideful about something, and then trying to fix that.
yeah. Why can't I hand this off? Be honest. Like think
Yep.
about it, talk about it with people who know you well, and figure that out. So the next step I would say is organize all of them by role. And
Yep.
the reason that I would say that is because um, there are some roles. I had a situation where someone was like, "Oh yeah, we want to hire someone who's this and this, right?" And I'm just like, I don't think that's the right thing to do because there are two specialty things that you sometimes find together, but that are different enough to where it's not easy to find someone who is like going to say they do both, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, well, we need a creative director and a strategist. And I'm like, depend on what we mean by creative director, what we mean by strategist, because they can be the same person, but rarely. You're rarely going to find someone with a cognitive style who's good at both of those things. And I was just like, we need to find a contract creative director, and then we need to find a contract strategist or in-house the strategy, right? Because you're not going to be able to find this role just because the last person who did it had this combination. We're not going to be able to fill that role the same way because we
Mm-hmm.
can't find that carbon copy of that person. And so part of that is just making sure that you're not, because you're going to pay top dollar for those people who are really good. You need to hire a lawyer um, for your company. You're going to pay top dollar for someone who's really specialized, right? But if you're
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, let's simplify the roles, simplify the tasks, and then group the tasks by cognitive style. And then you have like and that's a different topic too, cognitive styles, like people who are innovators versus adapters, so there's a little bit of conversation around that. But you don't want a creative doing your project management necessarily because they just think differently, right? You don't
Yep.
want a salesperson doing creative. You really don't. And I know millions of places that say you will, but look, I'm an expert because I wrote my thesis in it and I've
Yep.
been in the business. You do not want salespeople writing copy. You don't really want that if you want really good stuff. So you got to think about these roles, break them down into things that work together, and then think about the fact that it's easy to go out and hire a project manager. It's hard to go out and find a project manager slash creative director slash bottle washer, right? So,
Yeah. Yep. Couldn't agree more.
and the
Um,
next one, maybe you could talk about decide how you'll fill those areas. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, there's basically two ways. You either hire someone in-house or you contract it out. Those are, I mean, yeah, those are generally the two ways you can fill it. And some of those roles are easier than others to fill or to contract out. Again, if you don't have experience in it, a consultant should be pretty good at helping you figure out, okay, here are the ones that you don't even need someone full time. You just need it 5 hours a week or something like that. That's a good person to probably just contract out. They're expensive, but like a lawyer, a lot of small businesses, you don't need a full time lawyer. You're going to pay
right.
a ridiculous amount for it. That's something that's good to contract out.
Yeah,
But a strategist who needs to be able to see your whole organization, see it from the top to the bottom, and all that, that's someone you probably want to hire full time just because they need to be in it day in and day out to understand your full organization and stuff like that. Unless you just need strategy in one little area, um, a strategist can be someone that's a little bit better suited to a full time position. But those are really the two biggest ways, and you have to be once. That's why you have to do the organization beforehand of the roles to decide how much do we need of each of these skill sets, where are they going to perform, what
yeah,
are their personality types. That will allow you to decide, okay, do we bring on full time, bring them internally, or do we contract out externally part time? And that can save you cost, it can save you headaches. because more people you can contract out, it's less people, less workman's comp you got to pay. I mean, there's benefits to contracting out if the role can do that.
Right.
So
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Exactly. So, so the next and last really decision you have to make is deciding how you lead those areas from a strategic standpoint. How will you lead those areas? And I think that they're so in EOS, right? The entrepreneurial operating system, we talk about having each role having a one number, right? It doesn't mean that as a small company, you don't have people, you don't have one person filling a few roles. So they have like one, like three numbers, right? But each role, and as you grow, right, that person is gonna hire someone for one of those, those things, and they're gonna manage those three people who manage each one number. But for now, you're small enough to where you need one per, you can only afford one person full time. They're managing three areas. Each one has a different number. And so point is though, that if we understand how we're like, what's the goal of each area. And so you might have, like, for instance, you might have your business development, which manages marketing and sales, and maybe even client service and that, or whatever, inside sales, outside sales, however you work it out. And so that may have a revenue goal, right? Like it's just revenue. It's like the amount of money that comes in. You might have another operations role whose one number is profitability, and they're responsible for profitability. And so that's the margin, right? And so and then down from there, they may help determine, like, okay, well, within business development, we have marketing. Well, then we need more marketing qualified leads, and we need to cost per marketing qualified lead, maybe is their one number, right? So deciding the numbers, and then also deciding how you will manage them, which is because it's really important as an entrepreneur that you are, as a business owner, that you are in control of all these things, that you can't tell them how to do everything. So my advice, and tell me how you build on this in our last like 2 minutes. So basically, my advice: have that one number, have 2 different meetings with each person every week. The one meeting would be about their goals, like we need to talk about your goal. Are you reaching your goal? How are you doing? What kinds of things are you running into? What kinds of problems? And then there's another meeting that's a management meeting that's just for them, called an O3 meeting. And this comes from Manager Tools, which I really love. They have this, O3 meeting, which is a one-on-one where they talk. It's half hour a week, every week. Talk to them for 20 minutes. Let them talk for 20 minutes. You take notes. And the last 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, if you have something in there and they're out of stuff, then you are able to bring something up. But this isn't a meeting where you come in and say, okay, here's what all the stuff you're doing wrong. It's like, you talk for a little bit, and then that gives them a chance to kind of connect with you on their terms, kind of even make excuses, right?
Yep.
So, hey man, we're out. I don't know if we want to get cut off, or we can do the intro. What do you think?
I think we can just wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. All right, this has been another episode of Talk Ops with Brandon and Chris, and where we encourage business owners to organize their business to get more money at sale and do a lot of other things. Comment, like, subscribe, notification bell. We love your comments and questions. And thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk with you next time. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks.